The Last Mixtape. Part 1, The Tape, Summer 1996. Chapter 1, June 1996, 3 months before. The best thing about Sarah's Honda Civic was that the tape deck still worked. The worst thing was that Matt knew this, which meant every time she picked him up, he'd already made a mixtape for the drive. "You're going to love this one," he said, climbing into the passenger seat and immediately ejecting whatever she'd been listening to, probably the Jagged Little Pill album she'd been obsessed with for 6 months. "I stayed up until 2 making it." "Matt, it's summer vacation. You don't have a curfew anymore." Sarah put the car in reverse, checking her mirror out of habit even though her driveway was empty, except for her dad's truck. "You could stay up until 6 if you wanted." "Yeah, but then I'd miss you calling at 8, wondering where I am." She didn't argue because it was true. They'd fallen into this rhythm after graduation. Sarah would call him every morning. Matt would already be awake. He'd always been a morning person, which she found personally offensive. And they'd make plans for a day that never quite went according to plan. Yesterday, they'd intended to go to the mall, but ended up at the county library looking through old yearbooks from the 70s, laughing at the hair. The day before that, they'd meant to see Twister, but the showing was sold out, so they'd driven to the next town over and watched it there, then stopped at 3 different diners trying to find one that made good milkshakes. That was their summer so far. Aimless. Perfect. Ending in exactly 83 days when Matt left for Berkeley and Sarah left for Penn State. But they didn't talk about that. Not yet. Not when the summer stretched ahead like an infinite highway and August was just a mirage on the horizon. Matt pressed play on his tape. The Smashing Pumpkins' 1979 filled the car, Billy Corgan's voice floating over that iconic drum beat, and Sarah had to admit he'd chosen well. "Where are we going?" Matt asked, fiddling with the volume until it was just right. "No idea. You?" "Not a clue." She turned left out of her neighborhood, heading toward the state route that would take them somewhere. Anywhere. It didn't matter. The windows were down, the June air was perfect, not too hot yet, just warm enough to feel like summer, and the entire day belonged to them. This was back when gas was $1.12 a gallon and you could drive for hours on $10. Back when nobody had cell phones, so your parents couldn't call and ask where you were, when you'd be home, who you were with. Back when getting lost was still possible, before GPS turned every drive into a series of commands from a computer voice. Back when Sarah thought they had all the time in the world. "So I have to tell you something," Matt said after they'd been driving for 20 minutes, heading south on Route 15 toward nothing in particular. "But you have to promise not to freak out." Sarah's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Those words never preceded good news. That's literally the worst way to start a sentence. "I'm serious. Promise first. I promise to freak out at a reasonable volume." "Good enough." Matt shifted in his seat, turning to face her profile. "Berkeley sent me this packet about freshman orientation, and there's this program where you can go a week early and do outdoor adventure stuff. Rock climbing, kayaking, camping in Yosemite. It's supposed to help you meet people before classes start, and you want to leave a week early." Sarah kept her eyes on the road, watching the dotted white line disappear under the hood of her car. "To go camping with strangers. It's not that I want to. You just think it's a good idea." "Sarah," which it probably is. "It's smart. You should meet people, make friends, get acclimated." She was saying all the right words, even managing to sound supportive, but her hands hadn't relaxed on the steering wheel. "When would you leave?" "August 15th. That's..." Sarah did the math quickly, hating herself for already having counted the days until he left anyway. "That's a week earlier than we planned." "I know. So we'd have one less week." "I know." The song changed. but with the gin blossoms now follow you down. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. You should do it, Sarah said, and she meant it, even though part of her wanted to drive this car off the road and into a ditch if it meant stopping time, if it meant keeping everything exactly as it was. The two of them, driving nowhere, the summer infinite, August, an abstract concept that would never actually arrive. Yeah? Yeah, it sounds amazing. You love camping. You hate meeting new people. So forcing yourself to do it before you're drowning in coursework is probably smart. She glanced at him quickly, then back to the road. Plus, I'll still see you until mid-August. That's basically the whole summer. Basically, Matt agreed. But something had shifted in the car. The air felt heavier. The space between them felt wider. They drove in silence for a while, letting the tape fill the gap. Sarah recognized most of the songs. Matt's taste wasn't adventurous, hot, but it was reliable. He made tapes the way some people wrote letters, carefully curating each song to say something words couldn't quite capture. This tape was full of summer-feeling songs, upbeat, nostalgic, tinged with melancholy. Songs about time passing and trying to hold on to moments and knowing you can't. "Can we not do this?" Matt said finally. "Do what?" "The thing where we both pretend everything's fine and then one of us gets quiet and weird and the other one feels guilty." He reached over and turned down the volume. "I don't want to spend our last summer being weird." "I'm not being weird. You're driving exactly 55 in a 55 zone. You never drive the speed limit." He was right. Sarah eased off the gas slightly, let the speedometer drop to a more reasonable 62. "Better? Better. I'm not mad about the camping thing. I'm really not." And she wasn't. Not exactly. She was mad at August. Mad at colleges 3,000 miles apart. Mad at guidance counselors and U.S. news rankings and the entire concept of pursuing your dreams when your dream was sitting right here in your passenger seat, making you mixtapes at 2 in the morning. But she couldn't say any of that, so she said, "Where should we go today?" "Somewhere new," Matt said immediately. "Somewhere we've never been." "That's everywhere. We live in central Pennsylvania. We've been to like 4 places. Then let's make it 5. So Sarah kept driving south, kept following Route 15 as it wound through farmland and past small towns with names like Mifflinburg and New Berlin. They stopped at a gas station in Lewisburg and bought terrible coffee and Hostess cupcakes, sat on the hood of the car in the parking lot, and watched an old man try to figure out the pay at the pump system. They got back on the road and kept going, no destination in mind, just following whatever highway looked interesting. Around 1 o'clock, they found themselves in a town called Bloomsburg, population 12,000. Notable for absolutely nothing, except it had a diner with a giant ice cream cone on the roof. They went inside because Sarah insisted any place that committed that hard to ice cream had to have good food. She was wrong. The burgers were mediocre and the fries were soggy, but the milkshakes were exceptional. And they sat in a red vinyl booth for 2 hours watching local characters come and go. A woman with 4 children under 6 who looked like she needed a vacation, a teenager in a Blockbuster uniform on his break, an elderly couple who sat in comfortable silence reading separate sections of the same newspaper. "That's going to be us in 50 years, Matt said, nodding toward the elderly couple. "Reading newspapers?" "No. Still hanging out. Still going to weird diners in random towns." Sarah wanted to believe him. Wanted to live in the version of the future where they stayed together, where distance didn't matter, where love at 17 was strong enough to survive everything life would throw at them. But she'd watched enough friends go off to college and break up within weeks to know the statistics weren't in their favor. "Still," she said, "deal. 50 years from now, you're buying me a milkshake. You're buying. You'll be a rich lawyer by then." "Who says I'm becoming a lawyer?" "Sarah, you've been arguing with authority figures since you learned to talk. It's literally your calling." She threw a fry at him. He caught it and ate it, grinning. They left Bloomsburg around 3 and headed back north, the tape playing through side B now, the summer afternoon settling into that perfect golden quality where everything looks like a memory even while you're living it. Sarah drove slower on the way back, took the long way through back roads she'd never been on, extending the day as long as she could. "Hey," Matt said as they were pulling into her neighborhood. "Thank you for today." "For what? We didn't do anything." "Exactly." Sarah parked in her driveway and turned off the engine, but neither of them moved to get out. The tape had ended. The car was silent except for the ticking of the cooling engine. The sun was starting to set, painting her street in orange and pink. "I don't want to go home yet," Matt said quietly. "So don't." They sat there until the sky turned purple, until the streetlights came on, until Sarah's mom knocked on the window and asked if they wanted dinner. They ate spaghetti at Sarah's kitchen table, like her parents asking Matt about Berkeley, him giving enthusiastic answers that made Sarah's stomach hurt. After dinner, they sat on her front porch while moths circled the porch light, and Matt played Wonderwall on the acoustic guitar he'd carried over from his car, and Sarah thought, "I need to remember this. Not just the big moments, not graduation or prom or the last day of school, but this ordinary Tuesday in June, this nothing special evening, this exact quality of light and sound and feeling." Because something told her that when she was older, when she looked back on this summer, it wouldn't be the dramatic moments she'd remember. It would be this: sitting on her porch while Matt played the same 4 chords over and over, getting them wrong half the time, the cicadas drowning out his singing, both of them laughing because it was terrible, but also perfect. "I'm making you a tape for your birthday," Matt announced suddenly, stopping mid-chord. "A good one, the best one I've ever made." "My birthday's not until August." "I know, but I might not be here for it, so I'm making it now and you can listen to it after I leave, and it'll be like I'm still here. Sort of." Sarah felt something crack in her chest, some wall she'd been carefully building all summer to protect herself from this exact feeling. "That's really sad, Matt." "Yeah," he agreed, "but I'm doing it anyway." And he did. Chapter 2, July 1996, 2 months before. The thing about summer is that it moves at 2 speeds simultaneously. The days are endless, languorous afternoons that stretch from breakfast to midnight, but the weeks fly by, each one disappearing before you've properly finished it. Suddenly, it's the middle of July, and you're realizing summer is more than half over, that the infinite stretch of time you thought you had is actually very finite, that August is approaching at an alarming rate. That's where Sarah and Matt were, mid-July, starting to panic. They'd tried to make a list of everything they wanted to do before Matt left. The list was ambitious: drive to the beach, camp overnight somewhere, finally watch all 3 Godfather movies in one sitting, teach Sarah to play guitar, have Matt try sushi even though he swore he'd hate it, find that supposedly haunted bridge that Sarah's cousin mentioned once. But the list kept growing faster than they could check things off, and every time they did something, it felt weighted with significance. This is the last time we'll do this. This is the last time it'll be this easy. On July 15th, 51 days before Matt's flight to California, they finally made it to the beach. Ocean City, Maryland, a 4-hour drive that they started at 6 in the morning because Sarah wanted to get there before the crowds. Matt slept for the first hour, his head against the window, and Sarah drove through the sunrise thinking about all the things she wanted to say but wouldn't. Don't go. Choose me. I know it's selfish, but I need you to choose me. Stay. She didn't say any of it. Instead, when he woke up, she handed him a fresh mixtape she'd made and said, "Your turn to DJ." The beach was perfect. Not too crowded yet, the water cold but manageable, the sun hot enough to feel like July. They claimed a spot near the water, spread out the towels Sarah had stolen from her parents' linen closet, and spent the morning doing the things people do at beaches. Swimming, reading magazines, burying each other's feet in sand, arguing about whether seagulls were smart or just persistent. Around noon, a group of girls set up camp nearby. College-aged, tanned, and confident in a way that made Sarah suddenly aware of her one-piece swimsuit and the book she was reading about Supreme Court cases. One of them kept looking at Matt, catching his eye and smiling in that universal language of beach flirting. "You should talk to her," Sarah said, trying to sound casual. Matt looked up from the absolutely terrible Tom Clancy novel he'd brought. "What?" "That girl. She's been staring at you for 10 minutes. So she's pretty? And we're going to different colleges. You should practice talking to pretty girls." "I talk to a pretty girl all the time," Matt said, which should have been smooth but came out awkward because he immediately blushed and went back to his book. Sarah felt her own face heat up. They didn't do this, didn't flirt directly, didn't acknowledge the thing that everyone else could see, but they'd never quite defined. They were best friends who held hands sometimes. Best friends who'd kissed once at graduation in the parking lot, both of them pretending it was just the emotion of the moment. Nothing serious, nothing that needed to be discussed. Best friends who were about to spend 4 years 3,000 miles apart. "I'm going to get us drinks," Sarah said, standing up and brushing sand off her legs. "Watch our stuff." She walked to the boardwalk and stood in line at a smoothie place, taking longer than necessary, watching Matt from a distance. He'd gone back to reading, completely oblivious to the girl who was still watching him. That was Matt's whole deal. He had no idea how people saw him. No idea that he was funny and kind and interesting enough that girls noticed. He just existed in his own world, genuinely surprised whenever someone showed interest. When Sarah came back with 2 strawberry smoothies, the girl had moved on and Matt had fallen asleep on his towel, the book open on his chest. She sat down quietly and watched him sleep for a while, memorizing details. The way his hair stuck up weird on one side, the sunburns starting on his shoulders, the worn-out Nirvana t-shirt he'd owned since sophomore year. In 60 days, he'd be someone else's friend, someone else's study partner, maybe someone else's something more than friend. The thought made her feel sick. "Stop staring at me, weirdo," Matt said without opening his eyes. "How did you know I was staring?" "I could feel it. Your stare is very loud." Sarah poked him in the ribs. "Get up. We're going back in the water." They spent the afternoon in the ocean, getting knocked over by waves and trying to body surf with limited success. At one point, a particularly big wave sent them both tumbling, and when Sarah came up sputtering and disoriented, Matt was there, steadying her, asking if she was okay. His hand was on her arm, and the water was cold, but she felt warm. Felt like something was about to happen. Some moment was about to crystallize into something they couldn't take back. But then a group of teenagers cannonballed nearby, and the moment broke, and they paddled back to shallower water and didn't talk about it. They left the beach around 6, both sunburned and exhausted, and stopped at a diner for dinner. Sarah got a cheeseburger she was too tired to finish, and Matt got a cheesesteak he devoured in approximately 4 minutes. The waitress kept refilling their Cokes, and they sat in a booth by the window watching the sunset over the parking lot, neither of them in a hurry to start the long drive home. "This was a good day," Matt said, stealing one of Sarah's fries even though he'd finished his own. "Yeah. Can we do it again next week?" Matt, we can't drive to the beach every week. Why not? What else are we doing? He had a point. Sarah's summer job at the library was only 15 hours a week, and Matt had quit his job at the movie theater because his manager was a jerk. They had nothing but time. Okay, she said. Every week until you leave. New beach each time. Deal. They shook on it, his hand warm and dry in hers, and Sarah felt that familiar ache in her chest, the one that showed up more and more lately. The ache of knowing this couldn't last. That in 51 days, no, 50 now because a day had passed, Matt would be gone and she'd be alone with all these memories and no one to share them with. The drive home was quiet. Matt fell asleep again around the halfway point, and Sarah drove through the darkness, listening to his soft snoring and the mixtape she'd made, which had somehow turned maudlin in the second half. Songs about missing people and time passing and trying to hold on to things that were already slipping away. She pulled into Matt's driveway around 11 and shook him awake. He stumbled out of the car, thanked her for driving, started to walk toward his house, then turned back. Hey, Sarah? Yeah? I don't want this summer to end. Me neither. So let's not let it. Let's just keep doing this, driving nowhere, going to beaches, making tapes, all of it. Let's just refuse to acknowledge August exists. That's not how time works, Matt. Says who? Physics, biology, the basic structure of reality. Details. He grinned, that crooked grin that made him look younger than 18, like the kid she'd met in freshman biology, who'd asked to copy her notes and then stayed after class to debate with her about whether viruses were technically alive. Good night, Matt. Night, Sarah. Thanks for today. She watched him walk inside, waited until his bedroom light came on, then drove the 2 blocks to her own house. Her parents were already asleep. She showered off the beach grime, changed into an old t-shirt, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. On her nightstand, her alarm clock glowed. 11:47 p.m. July 15th was officially over. 50 days left. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, but her mind kept replaying the day, the ocean, the waves, that almost moment when Matt's hand was on her arm and something could have happened but didn't. She kept thinking about that college girl on the beach, the one who'd noticed Matt and smiled, who'd seen what Sarah saw. That girl didn't have any context, didn't know his history or his quirks or the fact that he couldn't fall asleep without ambient noise, so he'd learned to sleep through anything. That girl just saw an attractive guy on a beach and thought, maybe. In 60 days, there would be hundreds of those girls. Thousands. Girls at Berkeley who were smarter than Sarah, prettier than Sarah, closer than Sarah. Girls who wouldn't have 3,000 miles of distance to navigate, or separate lives to build, or different futures to pursue. Girls who could just like Matt and date Matt and be with Matt without it being complicated. Sarah rolled over and looked at her bulletin board, covered in photos from the past 4 years. Matt and her at homecoming, at prom, at graduation, on random days, doing random things. They documented everything, taking pictures before it was easy, before everyone had cameras in their pockets. Those photos had to be earned. You had to finish the roll of film, take it to get developed, wait 3 days, pay $12, then divide up the pictures. She'd kept most of them. Matt had a bunch too. They'd created this shared history, this catalog of moments that proved they'd existed together, that their friendship was real and important and worth preserving. But what happened when you created all these memories and then one person left? What happened to all these photos, all these tapes, all these inside jokes and shared references? Did they just sit in a box somewhere, relics of a past version of yourself? Sarah got out of bed and walked to her desk. In the bottom drawer, under old school papers and yearbooks, she found her journal, the one she'd been keeping since junior year, but barely wrote in anymore. She flipped to a blank page and wrote, July 15th, 1996, 50 days left. Today we went to the beach. Tomorrow we'll do something else. And the day after that, something else again. And I'll keep pretending that 50 days is forever, that we have all the time in the world, that August is just a myth. I'm getting really good at pretending. She closed the journal, got back in bed, and eventually fell asleep to the sound of cicadas outside her window and the quiet ache of knowing that no matter how tightly she held on, summer was already slipping through her fingers. Chapter 3. August 1996, the last week. Matt finished Sarah's birthday tape on August 7th, exactly 1 week before he was supposed to leave for Berkeley's pre-orientation camping trip. He recorded it in his car, parked in his own driveway because his younger brother had the house to himself and was being loud about it. The tape had been through multiple iterations. He'd started making it back in early July, but every time he thought it was done, he'd realize he'd missed a song that was essential, something that captured a specific memory or mood or inside joke. So he'd erase and re-record, stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning in his car with the interior light on, trying to get it perfect. Now it was done. 22 songs, carefully ordered, with little messages recorded between tracks. His voice sounded weird to him on the playback, too nasal, too uncertain. But there was no time to re-record. He had 1 week left with Sarah, and he needed to give her the tape before he lost his nerve. Her birthday was August 12th, 3 days before he was supposed to fly out. He'd originally planned to be there for it, to take her to dinner or a movie or something appropriately birthday-like, but now he'd be in Yosemite, rock climbing with strangers and trying not to think about the fact that he'd chosen a week of outdoor adventures over Sarah's 18th birthday. She'd said it was fine. She'd said she understood. She'd said all the right things, but Matt knew better. He knew she was hurt even if she wouldn't admit it. He knew because she'd started doing this thing where she'd get quiet in the middle of conversations, like she was somewhere else, and when he'd ask what she was thinking about, she'd say nothing in a way that meant everything. They'd spent almost every day together since that first beach trip. Made it to Ocean City 2 more times, went to Rehoboth Beach once, drove up to some lake in New York that took 6 hours to reach and turned out to be completely unremarkable. Saw movies, ate at diners, drove in circles, stayed up too late, woke up too early. They were trying to squeeze 4 years of friendship into 60 days, and it was starting to feel desperate. Matt ejected the tape from his car's tape deck and held it in his hand. The label was handwritten in blue pen, Matt, Sarah, Summer 96. He'd tried to keep his handwriting neat, but he'd pressed down too hard and you could feel the grooves of the letters through the plastic. He got out of his car and walked to Sarah's house. It was 8 p.m. on a Wednesday, the summer air thick and humid, cicadas screaming in the trees. The sun was setting, but it was still light out, that weird in-between time when day is becoming night but hasn't committed yet. Sarah's mom answered the door. "Hi, Mrs. Fletcher. Is Sarah home?" "She's in her room packing. Go on up." Matt climbed the stairs to Sarah's room, a space he knew as well as his own. Her door was half open, and he could see boxes stacked against the walls, her bookshelf half empty, her bulletin board bare. The sight of it hit him harder than he expected, the evidence that she was leaving too, that this wasn't just about him going to Berkeley. They were both leaving, both moving forward into separate futures. He knocked on the doorframe. "Hey." Sarah turned from where she was folding clothes into a box. She was wearing an old Penn State t-shirt her dad had given her and cut-off jean shorts, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked tired. They both were tired. Tired from cramming an entire summer into too few weeks, tired from pretending everything was fine, tired from not talking about the thing they both needed to talk about. "Hey," she said back. "What's up?" Matt held up the tape. "Finished your birthday present." "Matt, you didn't have to." "I know, but I wanted to." He stepped into her room, navigating around boxes. "I was going to wait until your actual birthday, but since I won't be here, I thought maybe I should give it to you now, so you can listen to it before you leave for school." Sarah took the tape from him, turned it over in her hands. "You wrote on it?" "Yeah. So you'd remember when I made it, in case you want to listen to it in 10 years or whatever, you'll know it was summer of '96. Why would I wait 10 years? I don't know. Maybe you'll want to remember what we were like now, before we grew up and became boring adults." Sarah sat down on her bed, still holding the tape. "I'm never going to be a boring adult. Promise?" "Promise." Matt sat down next to her, leaving a careful 6 inches of space between them. That was new. The space. Back in June, they'd sit pressed together without thinking about it, comfortable in each other's proximity. But sometime in July, the space had appeared, and it had been growing wider ever since. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said, not looking at him, just staring at the tape in her hands. "Yeah." "Do you think we'll stay friends?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy and honest and scary. Matt had been asking himself the same thing for weeks, had been lying awake at night, running scenarios, calculating odds, trying to predict the future like it was a math problem he could solve. "I want to," he said finally. "I really, really want to." "That's not the same as thinking we will." "I know." Sarah finally looked at him. "Everyone says long-distance friendships don't work. That you meet new people and drift apart, and eventually you just stop calling. We're not everyone. But what if we are? What if we're just like every other high school friendship that doesn't survive college?" Matt didn't have an answer. Or rather, he had too many answers, and none of them were the ones Sarah wanted to hear. He wanted to say they'd talk every day, write letters every week, visit every break, stay exactly as close as they were now. But he'd watched his older cousins go through this, had seen how freshman year changed people, how new experiences and new friends created distance faster than any actual mileage could. "I don't know what's going to happen," he said honestly, "but I know I'm going to try. I'm going to call you and write you and annoy you so much you'll wish I'd stayed in Pennsylvania just so you could tell me to shut up in person." Sarah smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I could never wish that." They sat in silence for a while, both of them looking at the tape in Sarah's hands, both of them thinking about the summer that was ending and the futures that were beginning and the impossible distance that was about to be between them. "I made you something too," Sarah said suddenly, "but it's embarrassing and I'm not giving it to you." "What is it?" "A scrapbook of photos from this summer. I was going to give it to you as a going-away present, but then I finished it and realized it's basically a collection of pictures of us looking sunburned and tired, so it's actually a terrible present." "I want to see it." "Absolutely not." "Sarah." "No." She stood up and walked to her closet, pulling out a shoebox. "You can have it, but you can't look at it until you're on the plane." "Promise?" "That's a weird rule." "Promise, Matt." "Fine, I promise." She handed him the shoebox. It was heavier than he expected, weighted with photos and probably other things she'd added. He wanted to open it immediately, wanted to see what she'd made, but a promise was a promise. "Thank you," he said. "For this and for everything, I guess. For this summer. For every summer before this. For being my friend even when I'm annoying." "You're not annoying?" "I'm a little annoying." "Maybe a little," Sarah conceded, "but in a good way." Matt stood up, still holding the shoebox. He knew he should leave. It was getting late, and Sarah clearly had more packing to do. But he didn't want to. Didn't want to walk out of this room and end whatever this moment was, because it felt significant in a way he couldn't quite articulate. "I'm going to miss you," he said, and immediately felt stupid for saying something so obvious. "I'm going to miss you too. Will you listen to the tape? I know you're going to be busy with packing and moving and everything, but I'll listen to it," Sarah promised. "The whole thing, every song." Matt nodded, and before he could second-guess himself, he stepped forward and hugged her. Sarah went still for a second, surprised, then hugged him back, fierce and tight. They stood like that for a long time, longer than any hug they'd shared before, both of them holding on like letting go would mean losing something they couldn't get back. When they finally separated, Sarah's eyes were wet. She wiped them quickly, turned away. "You should go," she said, her voice rough. "I have to finish packing." "Yeah, okay." Matt walked to the door, then turned back. "Hey, Sarah? Yeah? Happy birthday. Wherever you are when you listen to that tape, whatever you're doing, I hope you're dancing." He left before she could respond, before he could see if she was crying, before he could change his mind about leaving at all. He walked down the stairs, said goodbye to Mrs. Fletcher, got in his car, and sat there for a long time, not starting the engine, just holding the shoebox Sarah had made him, and thinking about the tape he'd made for her, and wondering if any of it would be enough to keep them connected when 3,000 miles separated them. Eventually, he drove home. The next 7 days passed in a blur. Last-minute shopping, final goodbyes, too many family dinners where relatives asked him about his plans and his future, while all he could think about was Sarah. He saw her twice more. Once at a going-away party his parents threw, where they barely talked because there were too many other people. And once the night before he left, when she came over at 11 p.m. and they sat in his backyard, looking at stars and not talking about the fact that this was it. This was the last time. This was goodbye. "You'll call me when you get there?" Sarah asked. "Of course. And you'll send me your dorm address so I can write?" "Obviously. And you'll..." "Sarah." Matt took her hand. "I'm not disappearing. I'm just going to California. Which might as well be the moon. It's not the moon. It's 6 hours by plane. We'll visit. We'll write. We'll make it work." Sarah nodded, but she didn't look convinced. Matt's flight left at 6 a.m., which meant his parents woke him up at 4. He was exhausted and disoriented and deeply resentful of whoever decided flights should leave before sunrise. He stumbled through security, got on the plane, found his seat, and immediately fell asleep. When he woke up, they were somewhere over Nebraska, and the sun was bright through the window, and the shoebox Sarah had made him was still unopened in his bag because he'd promised not to look until the plane. Matt pulled it out and opened it carefully. Inside was a scrapbook, not the kind you buy at a store, but something she'd made herself out of blank pages and photos and her own neat handwriting. The first page said, "Summer of 1996" in her loopy cursive, with a photo of them on the first day of summer, sitting on her porch, both of them smiling at the camera. He turned the pages slowly, savoring each one. Photos of them at the beach, at diners, in her car, on his porch. Photos he'd forgotten she'd taken, moments he'd forgotten they'd captured. Between the photos, she'd written captions and memories and inside jokes, creating a narrative of their summer together. The last page had a photo of them from graduation, both in their caps and gowns, both laughing at something off camera. And underneath, Sarah had written, "Matt, thank you for the best summer of my life. Thank you for every summer before that. Thank you for being you. I know the future is scary and we don't know what happens next, but I know that no matter what, no matter where we end up or who we become, I'm so grateful I got to spend these years with you. You're my best friend. That doesn't change just because we're on different coasts. Love, Sarah, P.S. Don't forget about me when you meet all those California girls who know how to surf. Matt closed the scrapbook and looked out the airplane window at the clouds below, at the vast expanse of country between Pennsylvania and California, at the distance that was already separating him from Sarah and everything familiar. He'd listened to the tape he'd made for her while creating it, knew every song by heart. But now, looking at the scrapbook she'd made, he wondered if the tape was enough. If 22 songs and some recorded messages could possibly convey everything he wanted to say, but hadn't. He opened his notebook and started writing a letter, a real one on paper, the kind he'd mail when he got to Berkeley. The kind Sarah could hold in her hands and read as many times as she needed to. Dear Sarah, I'm on the plane and I just opened your scrapbook, and now I'm crying in seat 17B while the businessman next to me pretends not to notice. So thanks for that. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I made the right choice coming here. I don't know if chasing some abstract idea of my best future is worth leaving behind the best present I've ever had. But I know this. You're not just my best friend. You're the person who knows me better than anyone. The person who makes everything better. The person I compare everyone else to, and they always come up short. And I know that 3,000 miles feels impossible. I know that staying close is going to be hard. I know that we're both going to meet new people and have new experiences and grow in ways we can't predict. But I also know that some friendships are worth fighting for. And ours is worth fighting for. So, I'm going to call you tonight, and tomorrow night, and every night until you tell me to stop. I'm going to write you terrible letters and mail you care packages with weird California stuff you don't need. I'm going to annoy you from across the country. Because that's what best friends do. Miss you already, Matt. P.S. I could never forget about you. Not even if I tried. He sealed the letter in an envelope he'd brought for this purpose, addressed it to Sarah's dorm at Penn State, and tucked it in his bag to mail when he landed. Outside the window, California was approaching. His new life was approaching. Everything was changing, but some things, some people were worth holding on to, even from 3,000 miles away. Part 2, The Distance, 1996 to 1998. Chapter 4, September 1996, the first month. Sarah's roommate at Penn State was named Jennifer, but she insisted everyone call her Jen. She was from Pittsburgh, had bright red hair and an impressive collection of Dave Matthews Band t-shirts, and talked approximately 3 times faster than any human Sarah had ever met. So, I'm pre-med, but I might switch to psychology because blood makes me nauseous, but people are fascinating, you know? And I have a boyfriend back home. His name is Tyler. He's at Pitt. We're trying long distance, even though literally everyone says it won't work, but whatever, we're different. And I'm thinking about rushing a sorority, but my mom says sororities are sexist, which fair, but also they do a lot of charity work, so I don't know. What do you think about sororities? This monologue occurred within the first 10 minutes of meeting Jen. Sarah, who was still unpacking her box of books and trying not to think about the fact that Matt hadn't called in 3 days, said, I don't know anything about sororities. That's so refreshing. Everyone here is so opinionated about everything. Like, we get it, you read Chomsky, calm down. Hey, is that your boyfriend? Sarah looked up. Jen was holding the photo Sarah had just unpacked, the graduation photo that had been on the last page of Matt's scrapbook. No, that's Matt, my best friend. Oh my God, your best friend? Jen's voice went up approximately 6 octaves. That's so much worse. Best friends always end up falling in love eventually. It's like a rom-com waiting to happen. Does he go here? He's at Berkeley. California? Oh, honey, no. That's not going to work. The time difference alone will kill you, that never mind the actual distance. Jen paused, probably sensing she'd said something wrong based on Sarah's expression. But I mean, you never know. Some long-distance things work out. Like me and Tyler. We're going to be fine. Sarah took the photo back and set it on her desk, facing the wall. We're just friends. Sure you are. That first week of college was a blur of orientations and icebreaker activities, and trying to navigate a campus that was somehow both enormous and confusing. Sarah attended every required event, signed up for too many clubs, bought too many textbooks she'd never use, and called Matt every night at 9 p.m. Except he didn't always answer. The first few nights, he'd been busy with his orientation program. Then he was busy moving into his dorm. Then his roommate had some family emergency, and Matt was helping him deal with it. Then. There was always something. Always a reason. Always an apology, followed by, I'll call you tomorrow. I promise. But tomorrow would come and he'd forget, or he'd be busy again, or he'd call but could only talk for 10 minutes before he had to go to some other orientation event or meeting or study group. Sarah understood. She was busy too. She was also meeting new people and trying to figure out her class schedule and navigating a social landscape that felt overwhelming and foreign. She was also exhausted and overstimulated and barely keeping her head above water. But she also wasn't forgetting to call him. 2 weeks into freshman year, Sarah finally listened to Matt's tape. She'd been saving it, waiting for the right moment, some quiet evening when she could give it her full attention. But quiet evenings didn't exist in college. There was always something happening. Someone knocking on her door, noise bleeding through the walls from a party down the hall. Finally, on a Wednesday night when Jen was at her boyfriend's fraternity doing whatever people did at fraternities, Sarah put on her Walkman, pressed play on Matt's tape, and lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling. The first thing she heard was his voice. Hey, so, this is probably weird, but I made you this tape for your birthday, and I figure even if you hate me by the time you get this. Sarah's chest tightened. She didn't hate him. She could never hate him. Even if we're not talking anymore, you should still have good music for summer, right? But summer was over. Fall semester had started. Everything had changed. The tape played through, song after song, each one a memory from the summer that felt simultaneously recent and ancient. Wonderwall. She's So High. Iris. Songs that had been everywhere in August but had already been replaced by whatever was popular now. Sarah couldn't keep up, couldn't track what was current when everything moved so fast. Between songs, Matt's voice kept appearing. Those little recorded messages. This next one made me think of that time we got lost trying to find your cousin's house. Okay, this one's for studying. I know this one's overplayed, but listen to the lyrics. And then, toward the end of side A, I'm really scared. Sarah sat up, pressed the Walkman closer to her ears. I'm scared I'm making a huge mistake. I'm scared I'm throwing away the best thing that ever happened to me because some guidance counselor said Berkeley was a better fit for my academic goals. What does that even mean? You're here. Everything good is here, and I'm choosing to leave it. Sarah felt her throat get tight. My dad keeps saying this is temporary. That if we're meant to be together, we'll find our way back. But Sarah, I don't want to find my way back. I don't want to leave in the first place. The song started, bare-naked ladies, the mood shifting abruptly, and Sarah realized she was crying. Not dramatic sobbing, just tears running down her face while she lay in her dorm room, listening to a boy who was 3,000 miles away tell her things he'd been too scared to say in person. She listened to all of side A, then flipped the tape. Side B started with Matt's voice again, different now, tired. So I almost didn't finish this tape. I almost just gave you side A and left side B blank. He talked about the letter he'd written but wouldn't read. He talked about her being okay without him. He talked about her meeting someone else. And I need you to promise me something. When you meet him, when you meet the person who sees what I see in you but has the guts to actually stay, I need you to give them this tape. No, Sarah said out loud to her empty room, to the tape, to Matt who wasn't there. I don't want someone else. But the tape couldn't hear her, so it just kept playing, song after song until it reached the end. The Verve's bittersweet symphony, 5.5 minutes of longing and strings and desperate beauty. When it ended, Sarah lay in the silence and thought about calling Matt right then, at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday, to tell him she'd listened to the whole tape, to tell him she missed him, to tell him everything she'd been holding back because she didn't want to be the clingy girl who couldn't handle long-distance friendship. But before she could decide, her phone rang. She scrambled for it, hoping it was him, hoping he'd somehow known she was thinking about him. Sarah, oh my God, you have to come to this party. It's in my boyfriend's frat, and there are so many cute guys. And I told them all about you, and they're excited to meet you, and... Jen, it's Wednesday. So? College doesn't have weekdays. Every day is Friday if you believe hard enough. Come on, you've been in your room every night this week. Live a little. Sarah looked at the Walkman, at Matt's tape inside it, at the last 2 weeks of missed calls and rescheduled conversations, and the growing distance that wasn't just about miles. Give me 10 minutes, she said. She went to the party. She met people whose names she forgot immediately. She drank bad beer from a red Solo cup and pretended to be having fun while pop punk blared from speakers, and everyone around her seemed to know exactly how to do college, how to be 18 and free and unburdened. A guy named Jake talked to her for 20 minutes about his philosophy class and seemed genuinely interested when she talked about her political science major. He had nice eyes and an easy smile, and when he asked for her number, she gave it to him. She got back to her dorm at 2 a.m., exhausted and smelling like beer and feeling hollowed out in a way she couldn't quite name. Jen was already asleep, snoring softly. Sarah brushed her teeth, changed into pajamas, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her phone blinked. One missed call from Matt. No message. She almost called him back, but it was 11 p.m. in California, and he was probably asleep, and anyway, what would she say? That she'd listened to his tape and cried? That she'd gone to a party and met a guy and felt guilty about it, even though Matt had literally told her to meet someone else? That she was starting to realize that maybe everyone was right, maybe long-distance friendships didn't work, maybe the best thing to do was let go and move on and stop holding on to something that was already disappearing? Sarah didn't call him back. She didn't call him back the next day either, or the day after that. And when he finally called her 3 days later, she talked to him for exactly 12 minutes before making up an excuse about a study group and hanging up. It was easier than admitting the truth, that she was scared and sad and starting to build a life that didn't include him because including him hurt too much. Chapter 5, December 1996, Winter Break. Matt came home for winter break on December 19th, the day after his last final. His flight landed at noon, and his mom picked him up from the airport, hugging him too tight and asking a million questions about classes and friends and whether he was eating enough vegetables. "I'm fine, Mom," he said for the 10th time. "California's great, Berkeley's great, everything's great." It wasn't entirely a lie. Berkeley was great. He'd made friends, joined an intramural soccer team, gotten decent grades. He'd explored San Francisco on weekends, tried sushi, still didn't love it, gone to concerts, stayed up too late having philosophical debates with his roommate Alex about whether free will existed. He'd done everything college was supposed to be. New experiences, new people, new version of himself. But he'd also spent 4 months feeling like a vital part of himself was missing. They drove home through familiar Pennsylvania streets that looked the same but felt different. Everything was smaller than he remembered. The roads narrower, the buildings shorter, the whole town somehow compressed in his memory while he'd been gone. Sarah's home, too, his mom mentioned casually, like she hadn't been leading up to this the whole drive. She got back yesterday. Her mom mentioned you should probably give her a call. I know, I'm going to. Are you two still? Still what? Still friends. You haven't talked about her much lately. Matt stared out the window at the passing houses, all decorated for Christmas, trying to figure out how to explain that yes, they were still friends, but it was different now. They talked maybe once a week instead of every day. Their conversations were shorter, more surface level, full of pauses where neither of them knew what to say. They'd both been busy with midterms, then finals, then the general chaos of freshman year. But mostly they'd both been avoiding the awkwardness of watching their friendship slip away while neither of them knew how to stop it. We're still friends, Matt said finally. We're just figuring out the long-distance thing. His mom nodded like she understood, but Matt could tell she didn't. How could she? She'd married his dad at 22, lived in the same town her whole life, kept the same friends since high school. She didn't know what it was like to have your entire world shift, to suddenly be surrounded by strangers, to realize that the person you told everything to was now someone you barely talked to. They got home and Matt unpacked while his little brother Sean bombarded him with questions about California and college girls and whether he'd learned to surf yet. Matt patiently explained that Berkeley wasn't on the beach, that he didn't have time for surfing, that college girls were just regular girls except more stressed. You're so boring now, Sean declared, and Matt couldn't really argue. That evening, Matt picked up the phone 6 different times to call Sarah. Each time, he chickened out. What would he even say? Hey, I'm home, want to hang out? That felt too casual. Hey, I've missed you and I think we need to talk about why we haven't been talking felt too heavy. Around 9 p.m., his phone rang. He picked up immediately. Hello? Matt, it's Sarah. His heart did something stupid in his chest. Hey, I was just about to call you. Liar. She said it lightly, teasingly, but they both knew it was true. I'm home, Matt said unnecessarily. I know. Your mom told my mom told me. Very efficient communication chain we've got going. Should we thank them or be worried? Definitely worried. Sarah paused. Do you want to get together? Maybe tomorrow? Yeah, definitely. Where? I don't know. Somewhere that isn't a diner? I think I've hit my lifetime quota of diner food. The mall? God, no. The mall is hell this close to Christmas. Fair point. What about that park on Mitchell Street, the one with the trail? In December? It'll be empty, no people, just us and some potentially aggressive ducks. Sarah laughed, and Matt realized how much he'd missed that sound. Okay, aggressive ducks it is. 2 o'clock? Perfect. They hung up, and Matt felt simultaneously excited and terrified. 4 months ago, seeing Sarah had been the easiest thing in the world. Now it felt like preparing for a first date. What should he wear? What should he say? How should he act? He went to bed early and couldn't sleep, his mind running through scenarios and conversations and all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. The park was, as predicted, empty, except for a few brave joggers and some ducks that looked personally offended by the cold. Matt got there 15 minutes early and sat on a bench near the frozen pond, watching his breath cloud in the December air. Sarah arrived exactly at 2, walking up the path in a blue winter coat he'd never seen before and a Penn State beanie. She looked different, not dramatically different, but different in subtle ways. Her hair was longer. She walked with her shoulders back in a way that suggested new confidence. She looked like someone who'd spent 4 months figuring out who she was without him. "Hey," she said, sitting down next to him, leaving careful space between them. "Hey, nice hat." "Thanks. It was in a welcome packet. Very official." She pulled her coat tighter. "It's freezing. Why did we agree to meet outside?" "You didn't want the mall." "I know, but now I'm questioning that choice." They sat in awkward silence for a moment, both of them looking at the frozen pond, at the ducks huddled miserably on the ice, at anything except each other. "So," Matt said finally, "so, how was your semester?" "It was good. Busy. My roommate is intense, but in a good way. Classes were harder than I expected. Made some friends." Sarah paused. "How was yours?" "Similar. Also busy. Also harder than expected. My roommate's from Oregon and really into philosophy, which means a lot of late-night debates about consciousness and reality." "Sounds exhausting?" "It is, but also kind of fun." Another silence, longer this time. "This is weird, right?" Sarah said suddenly. "We're being weird. So weird. We've never been weird before." "I know. So why are we being weird now?" Matt turned to look at her. "Because we spent 4 months barely talking, and now we don't know how to be normal with each other." Sarah met his eyes. "I noticed that. The barely talking thing." "Yeah, me too." "Whose fault is that?" "I think it's both of our faults. We both got busy. We both made other friends. We both—" Matt trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. "Moved on," Sarah supplied. "I didn't move on. I just adapted. To the distance, to the new normal." "That's a very diplomatic way to say you forgot about me." "I didn't forget about you, Sarah. I could never forget about you." Matt shifted on the bench, turning to face her fully. "But it's hard, okay? It's hard to maintain a friendship when you're 3,000 miles apart and in completely different worlds. I call and you're busy. You call and I'm at a study group. We try to schedule time and something always comes up, and eventually it just feels easier to text instead of call, and then easier not to text at all." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her breath clouding in the cold air. "I went on a date." Matt felt something drop in his stomach. "What?" "In October. This guy Jake from my philosophy class, he asked me to a party and I said yes, and we ended up dating for like 6 weeks." She glanced at Matt. "It didn't work out. He was nice, but he wasn't. It just didn't feel right." "Oh, are you mad?" "No, why would I be mad? You're allowed to date people." "Because on your tape you said—" Sarah stopped herself. "Never mind. What did I say? It doesn't matter." "Sarah," she sighed, pulling her coat even tighter. "You said when I met someone else, someone who actually stayed, I should give them your tape, to hold, so they'd know that before them, there was you." She looked at him. "But I didn't give Jake your tape. I didn't even think about it because he wasn't that person. He wasn't—" "Wasn't what?" "Wasn't you." The words hung in the frozen air between them, significant and scary and impossible to take back. Matt's heart was doing that stupid thing again, beating too fast, too hard. "Sarah, and I know that's not fair," she continued, talking faster now like she needed to get it all out before she lost her nerve. "I know you're not my boyfriend. I know we're just friends. I know you probably met someone at Berkeley and I have no right to be upset about that. But I listened to your tape, Matt, and you said all these things, and then you left, and then we stopped talking, and I didn't know what to do with all of it." "I haven't met anyone," Matt said quietly. Sarah looked at him. "What?" "At Berkeley. I haven't met anyone. I mean, I've met people, obviously, but not like that. Not anyone I wanted to." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with himself. with his inability to say what he actually meant. I made you that tape because I couldn't figure out how to tell you in person. And then I left before you could listen to it. And then we started growing apart. And I thought maybe it was better that way. Better to just let it fade than to deal with the fact that That you what? Matt looked at her, really looked at her, and thought about the summer, about every summer before that, about 4 months of missing her, about coming home and realizing that nothing felt like home without her in it. That I'm in love with you, he said. And I have been for a while. Maybe since sophomore year, maybe since we met, I don't know. But I know that going to Berkeley was supposed to help me figure out who I am. And instead, it just made me realize that whoever I am, I'm better when you're around. Sarah stared at him, her eyes wide. Matt. And I know the timing is terrible. I know we're at different schools and we're building different lives, and long distance is hard even for friends, never mind anything more. But I needed to tell you. I needed you to know that when I made you that tape, when I said all those things, I wasn't just being dramatic or sentimental. I meant it. A duck waddled past them, completely uninterested in their emotional crisis. Say something, Matt prompted when Sarah stayed silent. I don't know what to say. Anything. Tell me I'm an idiot. Tell me I ruined everything. Tell me to leave you alone. Just say something. Sarah was still staring at him, and Matt couldn't read her expression. She looked shocked, maybe, or confused, or possibly both. Then, without warning, she kissed him. It wasn't like the kiss at graduation. That had been soft, brief, experimental. This was different. This was 4 months of missing each other. 4 months of not talking about the thing they both needed to talk about. 4 months of pretending they were just friends when they'd never been just anything. When they finally pulled apart, both of them breathing hard, Sarah said, "You're an idiot. I know. You were in love with me all summer and didn't say anything. I was scared." Of what? Of exactly this. Of telling you and ruining everything and losing you completely. Matt reached for her hand. "You're my best friend, Sarah. You've been my best friend since freshman year. And I thought if I told you how I felt and you didn't feel the same way, I'd lose the friendship too. So you went to California instead." So I went to California instead. Matt agreed, which in retrospect was a terrible plan. The worst plan. Truly awful planning on my part. You could have just told me. I know. I would have said it back. Matt's heart stopped. What? I would have said it back. That I loved you too. That I've loved you for probably just as long. That the whole summer I was terrified of you leaving because I didn't know how to be myself without you. Sarah, but you left anyway. And we stopped talking. And I thought maybe you'd meet someone in California and forget about me, and that would be that. I could never forget about you. You say that now. I mean it. They sat there on the bench in the freezing December cold, holding hands, both of them trying to process what had just happened, what it meant, what came next. "So what do we do now?" Sarah asked finally. "I don't know. Long-distance relationships are even harder than long-distance friendships. But we were bad at the friendship version." Exactly. "So we'll probably be worse at the relationship version." "Probably. But we could try," Sarah said, squeezing his hand. "We could actually try this time. Instead of letting it fade, instead of making excuses and growing apart." "You want to try? I want to try." Matt kissed her again, softer this time, and thought about the summer, about the tape, about 4 months of missing her. He thought about going back to Berkeley in 3 weeks and Sarah going back to Penn State and 3,000 miles between them. "It's going to be hard," he warned. "I know. We're going to have to actually talk to each other, like regularly, not just when it's convenient. I know, and visit when we can, and trust each other. And Matt? Yeah?" "Shut up and kiss me again." So he did. Chapter 6, Spring 1997, The Reality. The thing about deciding to try a long-distance relationship is that the decision is the easy part. The actual execution is significantly harder. Matt and Sarah spent the rest of winter break together, making up for 4 months of distance by spending every possible moment in each other's presence. They watched movies, went to diners despite Sarah's complaints, drove in circles like old times, stayed up too late, talking about everything they'd been too scared to say before. It was perfect. And then January arrived, and they both went back to school, and reality set in. The time difference was the first problem. When Sarah was finishing her day at Penn State, it was only mid-afternoon in California. When Matt was free in the evening, Sarah was already asleep or studying for the next day. They tried to schedule calls, Tuesday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern, which was 6 p.m. Pacific, but someone always had something come up. A study group, a last-minute meeting, a friend in crisis. The second problem was loneliness. Being in a relationship with someone 3,000 miles away somehow felt lonelier than being single. At least when you're single, you're not constantly missing someone. You're not watching other couples walk around campus holding hands and feeling bitter about it. You're not lying in bed at night wishing someone was there and knowing they won't be there for months. The third problem was doubt. Not about each other, at least not at first, but about the situation. Was this sustainable? Were they wasting their time? Were they missing out on college experiences because they were trying to maintain something that might not survive anyway? Sarah didn't voice these doubts to Matt. She didn't want to be the person who gave up first, who admitted defeat, who couldn't handle what everyone warned them was impossible anyway. But she thought about them a lot. By March, they'd settled into a rhythm that worked most of the time. They called twice a week, texted daily, though texting on their Nokia phones was tedious and expensive, and sent each other care packages filled with random things from their respective coasts. Matt sent her in and out sauce packets and screenshots of beautiful Berkeley sunsets. Sarah sent him tasty cakes and photos of Pennsylvania in spring. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Then came spring break. They'd planned it back in January, during that optimistic honeymoon phase where anything seemed possible. Sarah would fly to California, spend a week with Matt, see Berkeley, meet his friends, experience his new life. It would be perfect. It would bring them closer. It would prove that long distance could work. Sarah arrived at Oakland Airport on a Saturday afternoon in mid-March. Exhausted from the flight and nervous about seeing Matt after 3 months apart. They'd talked every week, but talking on the phone was different from being in the same physical space. What if it was awkward? What if the chemistry they'd had over winter break was gone? What if... Then she saw him waiting at the airport gate, holding a handmade sign that said, "Welcome to California, Pennsylvania," and grinning like an idiot, and all her anxiety melted away. "Hey," he said when she reached him. "Hey." They kissed, and it felt right, felt like coming home, felt like maybe this could actually work after all. The first few days were good. Matt showed her around Berkeley, took her to his favorite spots, introduced her to his friends. Sarah met his roommate, Alex, who was exactly as philosophical as advertised, and his soccer teammates, who were surprisingly welcoming. They explored San Francisco, walked across the Golden Gate Bridge, ate at restaurants with views of the bay. It was romantic and exciting and exactly what Sarah had imagined. But by Wednesday, cracks started appearing. Matt had a study group he couldn't miss on Wednesday evening, so Sarah spent 3 hours alone in his dorm room while he was at the library. She tried to read but couldn't focus, tried to call Jen but couldn't get through, eventually just lay on Matt's bed staring at the ceiling and feeling profoundly out of place. When he got back, he was stressed about an upcoming test and distracted, barely acknowledged she was there. They tried to have dinner together, but he kept checking his notes, and Sarah found herself getting quietly angry at the situation, at school, at everything. "Are you okay?" Matt asked finally, noticing her silence. "I'm fine." "You're clearly not fine." "I'm just..." Sarah set down her fork. "I flew 3,000 miles to see you, and you've been studying. I have a midterm on Friday." "I told you about this." "I know, but what? I should just fail my test because you're visiting?" "That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" Sarah didn't know. She didn't know how to explain that she felt like a visitor in his life, like she was intruding on this world he'd built without her. She didn't know how to say that meeting his friends made her realize they knew a version of Matt she didn't, that they'd created inside jokes and shared experiences that didn't include her. She didn't know how to admit that part of her had hoped this trip would prove that long distance could work, and instead it was proving the opposite. "Never mind," she said. "You should study." Matt reached for her hand across the table. "Hey, I'm sorry. You're right. I'm being a bad host. Let me finish dinner, and then we can do something. Just us. No studying. You have a midterm on Friday. I'll wake up early and study. Tonight is for you." So they finished dinner and went to a late movie and pretended the tension hadn't happened. But it had happened, and Sarah couldn't quite shake it. The rest of the week was better. Matt took Friday off after his test, and they spent the weekend exploring Northern California, staying in a cheap motel in Mendocino and walking along the coast. It was beautiful and romantic, and reminded Sarah why they were doing this in the first place. But on her last night, as they lay in Matt's tiny dorm room bed, both of them trying to fit in a space designed for one person, Sarah felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. The distance, the time difference, the separate lives, the impossibility of it all. "I don't want to leave tomorrow," she said into the darkness. "I don't want you to leave either." "This is really hard, Matt." "I know. Like, harder than I thought it would be." Matt was quiet for a moment. "Are you having second thoughts?" "No, maybe. I don't know." Sarah turned to face him in the dark. "I just wish it was easier. I wish I could just be here with you instead of visiting for a week and then going back to Pennsylvania and counting down the months until summer." "Only 2.5 more months. That's forever." "It's not forever. It's 75 days. "You counted?" "Of course I counted." Sarah kissed him, trying to memorize the feeling, trying to hold on to this moment before she had to leave and go back to being alone. They made the most of her last night, stayed up until 4 a.m. talking and not talking, both of them avoiding sleep because sleep meant morning and morning meant goodbye. At the airport the next day, Sarah cried. She'd promised herself she wouldn't, promised herself she'd be strong and mature and handle this like an adult. But watching Matt wave as she went through security, seeing him get smaller and smaller until he disappeared from view, she lost it. She cried on the plane. She cried when she landed in Pennsylvania. She cried in the Uber back to campus. And when she got back to her dorm room, she lay on her bed and thought, I can't do this. I can't spend the next 3 years feeling like this. I can't keep saying goodbye. I can't keep missing someone this much. But she didn't say any of that to Matt when he called that night. She just said she got home safe, that she had a good time, that she loved him, because saying anything else would mean giving up, and she wasn't ready to give up yet. Chapter 7. Summer 1997. The Crossroads. Summer of 1997 was supposed to fix everything. They'd have 3 months together, no classes, no distance, no excuses. They could go back to how things were before, or better, since now they actually admitted they were in love. Matt came home in mid-May, a week after Sarah got back. They picked up where they'd left off at winter break, driving in circles, going to beaches, making new memories to sustain them through the next year of distance. But something had shifted. It was subtle at first, little moments of tension that hadn't existed before. Arguments about where to go, what to do, how to spend their time. They'd never argued before. They'd been the easy friendship, the couple that just worked. Now they had to work at it. The problem, Sarah realized around mid-June, was that they'd both changed. She'd spent 9 months at Penn State becoming a version of herself that didn't include Matt. She'd made friends, discovered interests, built a life that was entirely her own. Matt had done the same at Berkeley. Now they were trying to fit these new versions of themselves back into the old pattern, and it didn't quite work. "You're different," Matt said one night in late June. They were sitting in her car, parked at their usual spot overlooking the valley, the place they'd spent hundreds of hours during high school. "Different how?" "I don't know. More independent? More sure of yourself?" "It's not a bad thing. It's just different." "You're different too," Sarah countered. "You talk about Berkeley stuff, and I don't know what you're referencing. You have all these inside jokes with people I've never met. Sometimes it feels like you're speaking a different language." "So what do we do about it?" "I don't know." They sat in silence, listening to whatever was on the radio. Some Matchbox 20 song about change and growth and people growing apart. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. "Maybe," Matt said carefully, "we should talk about next year." "What about it?" "About whether this is actually working, whether we're both happy." Sarah felt her chest tighten. "Are you happy?" "That's not what I'm asking. But I'm asking you, are you happy in this relationship, with the distance and the difficulty and all of it?" Matt turned to look at her. "Honestly, I don't know. I love you. That part I'm sure about. But the logistics, Sarah, I can't tell if we're making each other happier or just making each other miserable in slow motion." "So what are you saying? You want to break up?" "No, maybe. I don't know what I want." "That's helpful. I'm trying to be honest." "Well, maybe you should try harder to figure out what you actually want before you bring it up." Sarah knew she was being unfair, knew she was picking a fight because fighting felt better than confronting the actual problem. But she couldn't help it. The idea that Matt was having doubts, that he might want to end this, made her feel panicky and defensive. They drove home in silence that night. No kiss goodbye. No, "I'll call you tomorrow." Just awkward waves and separate houses and the growing sense that something was breaking that they didn't know how to fix. They didn't talk for 3 days. Sarah spent those 3 days alternating between anger and sadness, convinced that Matt was going to break up with her, that this was the beginning of the end, that everyone who'd warned them about long distance had been right. On the 4th day, Matt showed up at her house at 9 in the morning. "We need to talk," he said when she opened the door. "Okay." They went to her backyard and sat at the patio table, the same table where they'd studied for finals sophomore year, where they'd planned their summer road trips, where they'd spent hours doing nothing and everything. "I've been thinking," Matt said, "about us, about next year, about what we're doing." Sarah braced herself for the breakup speech. "And I think," Matt continued, "we're approaching this wrong." "Wrong how?" "We're trying to maintain our high school relationship in a college context, and it's not working. We need to adjust. We need to accept that we're both changing and growing, and that's okay. We don't have to be the same people we were at 17. "So what are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we try harder, that we schedule more calls, even if they're short, that we visit more often. I'll come to Pennsylvania next time. That we trust each other enough to have separate lives but still come together. That we stop trying to be perfect and just try to be honest." Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. You don't want to break up? No. God, no. Sarah, I love you. I'm just trying to figure out how to love you from California without driving both of us crazy. So we try harder. We try smarter. We try different. Okay? Okay? Yeah, let's try different. They spent the rest of the summer adjusting their expectations. They stopped trying to spend every single moment together and instead made time for their separate friends and interests. They stopped pretending that long distance was easy and started being honest about when it sucked. They stopped trying to recapture what they had before college and started building something new. It wasn't perfect. They still argued sometimes. They still had moments of doubt. But they were trying, genuinely trying, in a way they hadn't been before. When August came and they had to say goodbye again, it hurt. But it hurt less than it had the previous year, because this time they had a plan. This time they knew what they were getting into. This time they were choosing each other, eyes open, knowing it would be hard. And sometimes choosing is enough. Chapter 8. Fall 1997, Spring 1998. The marathon's sophomore year was better than freshman year, but it still wasn't easy. Sarah and Matt called twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern. They stuck to the schedule religiously, even when they were tired, even when they had other things to do, even when they ran out of things to talk about after 15 minutes and spent the rest of the hour in comfortable silence. They visited each other during fall break. Matt came to Pennsylvania and met Sarah's college friends, saw her dorm, experienced her life the way she'd experienced his. It was awkward but good, and it helped them both understand each other's separate worlds better. They sent care packages, they texted daily, they made it work. Sarah dated other people, or rather, went on dates with other people, none of which went anywhere because she was already in a relationship. She wondered sometimes if she was missing out, if she should be having the full college experience of being single and carefree and not tied down to someone 3,000 miles away. But then she'd talk to Matt and remember why she wasn't. Christmas break was good. They spent 2 weeks together, both of them more relaxed than they'd been in months. They'd learned how to be with each other without the pressure of making every moment count, without the fear that distance was destroying them. Spring semester, Sarah studied abroad in London for 6 weeks. Being 7 time zones away from Matt instead of 3 was even harder. But by then they'd gotten good at the distance thing. They sent letters, they called once a week, they counted down the days until Sarah came home. When she got back to the States in March, Matt flew to Pennsylvania for spring break. They spent a week doing nothing much, watching movies, going to dinners, lying around her dorm room, and it felt normal in a way it hadn't since high school. We're getting good at this, Matt observed one night. At what? At being apart but still being together. Yeah, Sarah agreed. We kind of are. But the truth was she was tired of missing him, tired of phone calls and time zones and holidays where they had to choose between their families, tired of being in a relationship that required so much work just to exist. She didn't say any of that to Matt because she didn't want to be the one who gave up. They'd made it this far, through 2 years of distance, through doubts and arguments and the endless logistics of love across 3,000 miles. Giving up now felt like wasting all that effort. But as summer 1998 approached, Sarah started thinking about the future. They had 2 more years of college, 2 more years of distance. And then what? They'd never talked about what happened after graduation, about who would move where, about whether their careers would align or conflict. She started thinking about these things but didn't bring them up, because bringing them up meant acknowledging that the distance wasn't temporary, that it might be permanent, that they might be doing this forever. And she wasn't sure she could do this forever. Part 3. The Reckoning. September 1998. Chapter 9. The Tape Redux. Which brings us back to the beginning. September 1998. Sarah's dorm room. Junior year starting. 2 years and 1 month since Matt left for Berkeley. And Matt's tape, the one he'd made her for her 18th birthday back in the summer of '96, still unworn, still waiting. Sarah had listened to it twice since that first time freshman year. Once during a particularly rough patch sophomore year when they'd been fighting about something stupid, and once in London when she'd been homesick and lonely and needed to hear his voice saying kind things. Now she was listening to it again, lying on her bed in her junior year dorm, single room this time, no roommate to interrupt, and thinking about the past 2 years. They'd survived. Against odds, against advice, against common sense, they'd survived. They were still together, still talking, still in love, probably, though sometimes Sarah wondered if what they had now was love or just habit, just stubbornness, just refusal to admit defeat. The tape played through, Matt's voice appearing between songs. This next one made me think of that time we got lost. They'd gotten lost so many times that summer, literally and figuratively. Maybe they were still lost. I'm really scared. I'm scared I'm making a huge mistake. He had made a mistake. They both had. They should have talked about their feelings before he left. They should have been honest instead of pretending friendship was enough. They'd wasted so much time. When you meet him, when you meet the person who sees what I see in you but has the guts to actually stay. But Matt had stayed. Not physically, but he'd stayed in the relationship, stayed committed, stayed faithful through 2 years of distance and difficulty. That had to count for something. The tape ended. Sarah lay there in silence, thinking about Matt in California, about their scheduled call in 2 hours, about whether she should tell him what she'd been thinking lately, about whether it was time to admit that maybe they were holding on to something that had run its course. Her phone rang. She looked at the caller ID. Matt's dorm number, 2 hours early. Hello? Hey. His voice sounded off, strained. Can we talk? Sarah's stomach dropped. Those 3 words never preceded anything good. Yeah, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I need to tell you something, and I didn't want to wait until our scheduled call. Okay. Matt took a breath. She could hear it across 3,000 miles, could picture him in his dorm room, probably pacing, probably nervous. I got offered a research position, he said, for next semester, in the engineering department. It's a really big deal. Undergraduate research positions are super competitive, and this would look amazing on grad school applications. That's great, Sarah said, even though she could tell there was more. But it's full-time during the semester. Plus, I'd need to work in the lab over winter break, which means I wouldn't be able to come home for Christmas. There it was, the thing he'd been nervous to tell her. Oh, I know we planned to spend the whole break together. I know it's your junior year Christmas, and we had that whole trip to New York planned. But Sarah, this is my future. This is my career, and I can't pass it up. Sarah felt something crack inside her chest. Some final piece of hope or patience or faith that she'd been holding on to. Right, she said. Your career. Don't do that. Do what? Make it sound like I'm choosing research over you. That's not what this is. Isn't it, though? You're literally telling me you can't come home because of work. It's not just work, it's my future. It's grad school. It's everything I've been working toward. And what about us? What about what we've been working toward? That's not fair. None of this is fair, Matt. I've spent 2 years in a long-distance relationship, 2 years missing you, 2 years putting my life on hold because we're trying to make this work. And now you're telling me you can't even come home for Christmas? It's one Christmas. No, it's not one Christmas. It's every time. It's you choosing your life in California over any life we might have together. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being the girlfriend who waits, who understands, who accommodates everything. Sarah, do you even want this anymore? The question came out before she could stop it, the one she'd been avoiding for months. Do you actually want to be in this relationship, or are you just staying because you don't know how to leave? Silence on the other end. Answer me, Matt. I don't know. His voice was quiet, honest. I love you, but I don't know if love is enough anymore. I don't know if we can keep doing this for another year and a half, plus however long after graduation until one of us moves. Plus, so that's it? Sarah felt tears starting but pushed them back. 2 years of trying and you're just giving up? I'm not giving up. I'm being realistic. That's the same thing. No, it's not. Giving up is walking away without trying. Being realistic is acknowledging that sometimes things don't work out no matter how hard you try. Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to find some logical flaw in his reasoning, wanted to prove that he was wrong and they could make it work if they just kept trying. But she was so tired of trying. Maybe you're right, she said finally. Maybe we've been holding on to something that should have ended a long time ago. Sarah, I should go. I have class in the morning. Can we talk about this? Actually talk about it? I think we just did. Please don't hang up. Please, let's figure this out. But Sarah was already crying, tears streaming down her face, her chest aching with 2 years of accumulated missing and waiting and accommodating. I can't do this right now. I'll call you later. When? I don't know. Soon. Just not now. She hung up before he could respond, before she could hear him say something that would either make her forgive him or make her angrier. She turned off her phone, ejected Matt's tape from her Walkman, and held it in her hands. 2 years. 2 years since he'd made this tape, since he'd recorded those messages, since he'd promised they'd figure it out. 2 years of figuring it out, and where had it gotten them? Sarah stood up, grabbed her coat, and walked out of her dorm room. Down the stairs, out into the September night, across campus to the music building. The practice rooms would be open. There would be tape decks. And she needed to respond to Matt's tape, needed to say all the things she couldn't say on the phone, needed to create her own message in a bottle and send it across 3,000 miles. She found an empty practice room, sat down with a blank tape and a recorder, and pressed record. Matt, it's Sarah. It's September 1998, and I just listened to your tape again, the birthday tape, from summer of '96. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I've listened to it so many times over the past 2 years. Every time we fight, every time I miss you, every time I need to remember why we're doing this. And it always helped, always reminded me that underneath all the distance and difficulty, we love each other, that we chose each other. Another pause. But I'm not sure that's enough anymore. I'm not sure love conquers all, or distance makes the heart grow fonder, or any of those things we tell ourselves to make long distance feel sustainable. I think sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes the logistics win. Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat. On your tape, you talked about me meeting someone else, someone who stays, someone who chooses me over everything else. And for 2 years, I've tried to convince myself that you are that person, that you did choose me, that California was just a temporary obstacle we'd overcome. But you're choosing the research position, choosing to stay there over winter break, choosing your future in California over any future we might have together. And I understand it, I really do. It's a good opportunity, it's important for your career, you should take it. But I also can't keep doing this. Can't keep being the girl who waits and understands and accommodates. can't keep putting my life on hold for someone who keeps choosing everything else." Sarah stopped recording, rewound, listened to what she'd said. It sounded bitter, hurt, which was accurate, but maybe not fair. She recorded over it, tried again. "Matt, I'm not angry. Or maybe I am, but that's not the point. The point is that we tried. We really tried. And maybe trying isn't failing. Maybe we can try our hardest and still end up in different places. And that's okay. That's just life. Better, less accusatory, more honest. I'm making this tape because I wanted to respond to yours. Wanted to complete the circle. Wanted you to have something from me that you could hold on to the way I've held on to yours. And I wanted to tell you, thank you. Thank you for the best summer of my life, for 2 years of trying to make the impossible work, for loving me even when distance made it difficult. Thank you for making me that tape back in '96, for saying all those things you were too scared to say in person. Thank you for trying. But I think we need to stop trying now. I think we need to let each other go, not because we don't love each other, but because love sometimes means letting someone pursue their future, even if that future doesn't include you." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face now, but her voice stayed steady. "You should take the research position. You should stay in California over Christmas. You should build the life you're meant to have there, and I'll build mine here. And maybe someday, when we're older and settled and have become the people we're supposed to be, we'll find our way back to each other. Or maybe we won't. Maybe we'll just be two people who loved each other at 18 and tried their best but ultimately wanted different things. Either way, I need you to know, I don't regret it, any of it. Not the summer, not the tape, not the 2 years of trying. I just wish it had been enough." She stopped recording, sat in silence for a long moment. Then she pressed record one more time. "Hey, Matt. Happy life, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. I hope you're exactly where you need to be." Sarah stopped the tape, ejected it, wrote on the label, "Sarah, Matt, Fall 98. She'd mail it tomorrow. Let him have it. Let him listen to it and understand why she couldn't keep doing this. Let him hear in her voice what she couldn't say on the phone, that she loved him enough to let him go." Part 4. The tape comes full circle. September 1998 present. Chapter 10. After the tape, Sarah didn't mail the tape the next day, or the day after that. She kept it in her desk drawer next to Matt's original tape, a pair of messages that would never be delivered. They didn't talk for a week, then 2 weeks, then a month. October arrived, and with it the slow realization that they'd broken up without officially breaking up. They just stopped. Stopped calling. Stopped texting. Stopped trying. Sarah threw herself into her junior year. Harder classes, more clubs, new friends who didn't know about Matt, who didn't ask why she seemed sad sometimes. She went to parties. She went on dates. She built a life that didn't include waiting for Tuesday and Thursday phone calls. And slowly, painfully, she got better. In California, Matt took the research position, spent winter break in the lab, working on a project that would eventually become his undergraduate thesis. Went to New Year's Eve parties with his lab mates and pretended he wasn't thinking about Sarah, about the Christmas they were supposed to spend together. He dated other people. Casually, nothing serious. He built a life in California that didn't include phone calls to Pennsylvania, that didn't include counting down days until the next visit. And slowly, painfully, he got better too. They finished junior year, started senior year, graduated in 2000, 2 years after that September night when everything fell apart. Sarah went to law school in D.C., Matt went to grad school at MIT. They were both on the East Coast again, only a few hours apart, but they didn't reconnect. Too much time had passed. Too much had changed. Sarah became a lawyer. Matt became an engineer. They both got married, not to each other, to people they met in their 20s, good people who fit into their lives in ways that made sense. Sarah had 2 kids. Matt had 3. They built careers and families and entire lives that had nothing to do with each other. Years passed, then decades. They never talked about each other, but they never quite forgot either. Chapter 11. 2018, 20 years later, Sarah was 40 years old when she found the tapes. She was cleaning out her parents' attic, helping them downsize now that they were retiring to Florida. The attic was full of boxes from her childhood and college years. Yearbooks, old clothes, papers from classes she'd long forgotten. And there, in a box marked college, were 2 cassette tapes. One labeled Matt, Sarah, Summer 96, and one labeled Sarah, Matt, Fall 98. She'd kept Matt's tape all these years, had moved it from dorm to dorm, from apartment to apartment, always meaning to throw it away but never quite doing it. But she'd forgotten about her own tape, the one she'd made and never sent. Sarah sat down on the dusty attic floor and held both tapes in her hands. They were relics from another era, cassette tapes that you needed special equipment to play, technology that had been obsolete for a decade. But they were also time capsules, messages from 18-year-old Sarah and 18-year-old Matt preserved perfectly, waiting. On impulse, Sarah pulled out her phone and Googled Matt's name. Matthew Chen, senior engineer at SpaceX, based in Los Angeles, graduated MIT 2005, married to Emily Chen, 3 children. There was a photo on his company bio page. Matt at 40, looking older but still recognizable. Same smile, same eyes, different life. Sarah stared at the photo for a long time, then Googled herself. Sarah Fletcher Morrison, partner at Morrison Associates, based in Washington, D.C., graduated Georgetown Law 2003. Married to David Morrison, 2 children. They'd both done well, both built good lives, both become the people they were supposed to be. But Sarah wondered, what if they'd made different choices? What if Matt hadn't taken that research position? What if she'd been more patient? What if they'd figured out a way to make it work? She'd spent 20 years not thinking about these questions, and now, holding these tapes, they all came flooding back. Chapter 12. The Last Message. Sarah kept the tapes, brought them home, put them in a drawer in her office where David wouldn't find them, and asked questions. For 6 months, she didn't do anything with them. Just knowing they existed was enough. Then, in the summer of 2019, she was in Los Angeles for a work conference. She had a free evening, nothing scheduled, and SpaceX headquarters was only 30 miles away. She shouldn't do it. She had a husband, kids, a whole life that didn't include driving to Hawthorne to maybe catch a glimpse of a boy she'd loved at 18. But she did it anyway. She didn't go inside, just parked in the visitor lot and sat in her rental car, watching people come and go, wondering if one of them was Matt. At 6:15 p.m., she saw him. He was walking out of the building with 2 other engineers, all of them laughing about something. He was heavier than he'd been at 20, his hair shorter, his face more lined. But it was definitely him. Definitely Matt. Sarah's hand was on the door handle. She could get out, she could call his name, she could walk up and say, "Remember me? Remember that summer when we were 18 and everything was possible?" But what would be the point? They were 41 years old. They had separate lives, separate families. Whatever they'd had at 18 was gone, had been gone for 20 years. Sarah started her car and drove away without calling his name. Chapter 13, 2025, the ending that's also a beginning. Sarah was 47 when she finally listened to both tapes again. Her marriage had ended 2 years earlier. Amicable divorce, shared custody, no dramatic story, just 2 people who'd grown apart. Her kids were teenagers now, less interested in her, more interested in their own lives. She'd made partner at her firm, achieved everything she'd set out to achieve professionally. But something was missing. Had been missing for years, maybe forever. She dug out the tapes and found a vintage Walkman on eBay, the same model she'd had in college. When it arrived, she put in Matt's tape and pressed play. "Hey, so this is probably weird, but I made you this tape for your birthday." She was 18 again, sitting in her dorm room, hearing his voice for the first time in weeks, feeling the weight of 2 years of distance pressing down on her. "I'm really scared. I'm scared I'm making a huge mistake." 29 years later, Sarah understood. They'd both been scared. Both been making it up as they went along. Both been trying to hold on to something that was already slipping away. The tape played through. Then she listened to her own tape, the one she'd never sent. "Matt, I'm not angry. Or maybe I am, but that's not the point. The point is that we tried. We really tried. Thank you for the best summer of my life. I just wish it had been enough." Sarah cried, there in her home office, listening to 18-year-old Sarah say goodbye to 18-year-old Matt. Mourning something that had been lost 3 decades ago but still ached sometimes. When both tapes finished, she sat in silence for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and did something she'd been thinking about for 7 years. She sent Matt a Facebook message. "Hi, Matt. It's Sarah Fletcher, now Morrison, recently divorced, back to just Fletcher. I know it's been almost 30 years, but I was cleaning out some old boxes and found those tapes we made each other in 1996 and 1998. I finally listened to them. Funny how we were just kids, but thought we had everything figured out. Anyway, I hope you're well. This probably seems random. It is random, but I wanted to say hi. And thank you for everything, but especially for that summer. Sarah." She sent it before she could second-guess herself, then closed her laptop and tried not to think about it. 3 days later, Matt replied, "Sarah, wow. I can't believe you still have those tapes. I thought mine was lost years ago. I'm divorced too, 2 years now. Living in Pasadena, kids with Emily most of the time, and you're right, we were just kids. But I think we were also onto something. We just didn't know how to make it work across 3,000 miles. I've thought about you over the years, wondered how you turned out. From your LinkedIn, yes, I looked. It seems like you turned out pretty well. Would you want to talk sometime? Catch up? I promise not to make it weird." Matt Sarah read the message 5 times before responding. "I'd like that. Here's my number." They talked on the phone a week later. 47-year-old Matt and 47-year-old Sarah, both divorced, both grown, both completely different from who they'd been at 18, but also somehow the same. They talked for 2 hours, catching up on 3 decades. Careers, marriages, divorces, kids, life. It was easy and comfortable and felt like coming home to a place you'd forgotten existed. At the end of the call, Matt said, "So I have to ask, why did you reach out now, after all these years?" Sarah thought about lying, about saying it was just random, just seeing those tapes and feeling nostalgic. But they were 47. They'd lived whole lives. They didn't need to lie anymore. "Because I've been wondering for 30 years what would have happened if we'd made different choices," she said honestly. "And I figured maybe it was time to stop wondering and find out." "Find out what?" "If there's a version of us that works now, when we're older and settled and know who we are, when we don't have to be 3,000 miles apart, when we can just be." Matt was quiet for a moment. "I've wondered that too," he said finally. "Every single day for 30 years. Epilogue, the new tape. 6 months later, Sarah and Matt met in person for the first time in 29 years. They chose Portland, halfway between DC and LA, neutral territory, a city neither of them had history with. They met at a coffee shop downtown on a rainy Saturday afternoon in November. Sarah got there first, chose a table by the window, ordered a coffee she didn't drink because her hands needed something to do. She was nervous in a way she hadn't been nervous in decades. This was stupid. They were 47, not 18. They were adults, not kids with cassette tapes and dreams of forever. But her heart was beating the same way it had that first time Matt held her hand, senior year of high school at the movies, both of them pretending it was no big deal. Then Matt walked in. He saw her immediately, smiled, that same crooked smile, and walked over. They hugged awkwardly, both of them laughing at the awkwardness. "Hi," he said. "Hi." They sat down and looked at each other, really looked, taking in 3 decades of changes. The gray hair, the lines around their eyes, it's the weight of lived experience. "You look good," Matt said. "You're a liar, but thank you." "I'm not lying. You look exactly like I remembered, just more." "More what?" "More yourself. Like you grew into exactly who you were supposed to be." They talked for 4 hours, ordered food they barely touched, drank coffee until they were jittery, told stories about their kids, their careers, their ex-spouses, their lives. Some things were different. They'd lived different lives, had different experiences, had grown in different directions. But some things were the same. The ease of conversation, the shared sense of humor, the feeling of being understood by someone who knew you when you were still figuring out who you were. As evening approached and the coffee shop started closing, Matt said, "I brought something. It's kind of corny, but..." He pulled out a cassette tape from his jacket pocket. "You still have it?" Sarah said, recognizing the label. "Sarah, summer '96. Never threw it away. Moved it from apartment to apartment for 30 years. Probably should have tossed it during one of those moves, but I couldn't. I still have it too, at home. Plus the one I made you but never sent." "Why didn't you send it?" "Because it was a goodbye, and I wasn't ready to say goodbye." Matt nodded. "I found a place here that has old tape decks. Want to go listen to both of them? Hear what 18-year-old us had to say?" "That sounds terrible and uncomfortable and like it'll make us both cry. So yes?" "Yes." They found the vintage electronics shop, bought an old Walkman and a splitter with 2 headphone jacks, walked to a nearby park, sat on a bench, put in Sarah's tape, the one she'd made and never sent, and pressed play together. "Matt, it's Sarah. It's September 1998, and I just listened to your tape again." They listened in silence, both of them crying by the end. Both of them hearing 18-year-old Sarah try to find words for something that had no words. "Thank you for the best summer of my life. I just wish it had been enough." When it ended, they sat there for a long time. "I wish I'd sent it," Sarah said finally. "I wish you'd gotten to hear all of that back then." "Would it have changed anything?" "I don't know, maybe not. We were so young. We were always going to grow up and change and become different people." "But we're here now," Matt said. "We're here now and we're the people we became, and maybe that's enough." "Is it?" Matt took her hand. "I don't know, but I'd like to find out." So they did. They started over, slowly this time, not rushing, not trying to recapture what they'd had at 18, but building something new. Long distance again, because of course it was, they couldn't make anything easy, but different this time. They were adults with careers and kids and lives that couldn't just be uprooted. But they were also adults who knew what they wanted, who'd spent 30 years wondering what if, and were finally brave enough to find out. They visited every month, talked every day, made it work in ways they couldn't have made it work at 18, because they were wiser now, more patient, more willing to compromise. A year later, Sarah moved to California. Her kids were in college, her work was remote-friendly, and there was nothing keeping her in DC except habit. Matt met her at the airport, holding a sign that said, "Welcome to California, Pennsylvania." just like he had 23 years earlier when she'd visited Berkeley. "You kept the sign?" she asked, laughing and crying simultaneously. "I kept everything," he said. "I was always waiting for you to come back." They were 48 years old. They'd lived entire lives apart. They'd been married to other people, raised children, built careers, become the adults they'd always been meant to become. But now they were together. And this time, it was enough. Coda, the last mixtape. On their first anniversary of being together, really together, not long distance, but actually sharing a life, Matt made Sarah a new tape. He found a blank cassette on eBay, downloaded Spotify playlists, and transferred them to tape using equipment he borrowed from a friend who was way too into retro technology. Spent 2 weeks getting the song order perfect. The first song was Wonderwall, always Wonderwall. Between tracks, he recorded messages, not long speeches this time, just short observations. "This one made me think of summer '96. This one's for all the years we missed. This one's for everything we're going to do next." And at the end, after the last song faded out, Matt's voice came back one more time. "Hey, Sarah, we did it. We found our way back. It took 30 years, but we found our way back. And I know we're not 18 anymore. I know we're older and wiser and more complicated. But I still feel the same way I felt that summer, like you're the person who makes everything better. Like you're home. Happy life, wherever you are. But I hope wherever you are is here, with me, always." Sarah listened to the tape in their shared apartment in Pasadena, tears streaming down her face, Matt next to her holding her hand. "Thank you," she whispered when it ended. "For what? For waiting. For 30 years, for all those tapes, for making it back to me." "You made it back to me too. So what happens now?" Matt pulled her closer. "Now we do what we should have done at 18. We just live. We build a life. We make new tapes. Literal tapes, metaphorical tapes, memories, moments, all of it." Sarah kissed him, and it felt exactly like that first kiss in her driveway after graduation, and nothing like it at all. Because they were different people now, carrying 30 years of experiences and scars and wisdom. But they were also the same people who'd loved each other at 18, who'd tried their best and failed and tried again. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the people who love you at 18 can love you at 48 too. Sometimes you just need 30 years and 2 cassette tapes to figure it out. The end.